Ladies and gentlemen, why are we not surprised? Why in the hell are we surprised on this case? This article comes from the New York Times, and this is why a lot of police officers are getting away scot-free. And people talking about, well, the justice system is broken. The hell it is broken. It's been set up this way. And Eric Garner, the person who killed Eric Garner, Dan Panteleo, the one who choked, Eric Garner to death, he will not seek federal charges. And this happened 5 years ago. 5 years ago. Man, I'm going to go ahead and read this article. It says the Justice Department will not bring federal charges against a New York City police officer in the death of Eric Garner, ending a year-long inquiry into a case that sharply divided officials and prompted national protests over excessive force by the police. The United States Attorney in Brooklyn, Richard P. Donahue, announced the decision not to bring criminal civil rights charges on Tuesday morning, one day before the 5th anniversary of Mr. Garner's death. That is the deadline by which they will have to file some of the possible charges against the officer, Dan Panteleo. I'm going to stop you right there. So, in other words, they waited 5 years for this. And remember, the state of New York has banned police officers of choking people. Banned it. And all of a sudden now, the Fed said, no, we ain't going to see criminal charges against Dan Panteleo. And they know the NYPD, was banning police officers in using chokeholds against anybody. So now, the man that killed, Eric Garner, he's now walking free. And ain't going to be no trial, and there's going to be no, nothing. He's going to be walking free because the feds decided not to charge her. I'm going to go ahead and continue. It says, Mr. Donahue called Mr. Garner's death a tragedy, but says, get this, guys, the evidence does not support charging police officer Dan Panteleo with a federal civil rights violation. I'm going to stop you again. This guy, he was killed on video. Dan Panteleo choked Eric Garner, and he was caught on video. And again, and I'm going to repeat this again, guys, the state of New York has banned police officers of using chokeholds. And you're telling me that there's no evidence support charging police officer Panteleo with a federal civil rights violation, and the man couldn't even breathe? You telling me that this man, Dan Panteleo, can walk free, and they knew that the NYPD has banned all practices when it comes to chokeholds? Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and move on. They said he went over the entire arrest step by step and said the government could not prove Officer Panteleo willfully used excessive force to violate Mr. Garner's rights as required under the law. The decision extinguished the hopes of the Garner family and their supporters that Officer Panteleo may face federal prosecution in a case that ignited demonstrations and debates over the use of force by police officers and led to changes in policing practices across the United States. After meeting with prosecutors, Mr. Garner's mother, Gwen Carr, denounced the decision, saying she would keep pushing to hold the officers involved in the arrest accountable. They also called on the city to fire Officer Panteleo, which right now, because of the federal, refuse to even charge him, that it's not going to happen now. I'm going to continue on. It says, we may not never know justice in the DOJ, but I think there will be justice, and we're going to keep fighting, Ms. Carr said. We're not going away, so you can forget that. The Reverend Al Sharpton, who was standing with her, added 5 years ago Eric Garner was choked to death. Today, the federal government choked Lady Justice, and that is why we are outraged. In June, the police department finished a disciplinary trial to determine if Officer Panteleo should be fired or punished in some other way for using what appears to be a chokehold, which the department had banned more than 2 decades ago. It is ultimately up to Commissioner James P. O'Neill as the final arbitrator of police discipline to decide whether to fire Officer Panteleo or take less drastic action like docking vacation time. They're not going to do a damn thing about this. They're not going to do a damn thing about this. They're going to allow him to keep his vacation time, and they're not going to fire him. What they're going to do, however, even if Officer Panteleo will be fired, he's going to go to another precinct, another precinct, and practice what he does best as a police officer. That's exactly what's going to happen. So they're not going to do a damn thing about this. I'm going to continue on. But Mr. O'Neill will not make a formal decision until the police administrative judge who oversaw the disciplinary trial renders her verdict. As he is still awaiting her report, a spokesman of the department, Philip T. Weisgott, said in a statement, because of the need to protect the integrity of the process, the NYPD will not comment further at this time, the statement says. Officer Panteleo, 34, has been on desk duty without a shield or a gun since Mr. Garner died, a status that has allowed him to accrue pay and pension benefits. Mr. Garner, who was 43, died on the Staten Island sidewalk on July 17, 2014, after Officer Panteleo wrapped an arm around his neck from behind and took him to the ground, and other officers put their weight on him, compressing his chest against the pavement. The officer had been ordered to arrest him for selling untaxed cigarettes, and he resisted them. A medical examiner testified at the disciplinary hearing that the pressure of Mr. Garner's neck and chest set in motion a fatal asthma attack. Some bystanders captured video of the attack on their cell phones, recording Mr. Garner as he gasps, "I can't breathe," dying words that became a rallying cry for protesters across the nation. His death was one of the several fatal encounters between black people and the police, including the fatal shooting of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, a month later, that catalyzed the national Black Lives Matter movement. Prosecutors did a rigorous analysis of the events, but in the end, they did not believe they had enough evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Officer Panteleo committed a crime, a senior Justice Department official said on Tuesday, speaking on the condition of anonymity because he had not been authorized to speak on the record. To prove criminal conduct, the official said the government had to convince a jury that in the middle of the dynamic arrest, Officer Panteleo made a clear decision in his mind to apply a chokehold, a burden prosecutors did not believe they could meet, the official said. None of the New York officers involved in Mr. Garner that have been charged with a crime or disciplined by the police department, a fact that has enraged the Garner family and various advocacy groups devoted to holding the police accountable for abuses of power. Mr. Garner family, including his mother, Gwen Carr, met with federal prosecutors and the Reverend Al Sharpton on Tuesday morning. A state grand jury declined to bring charges against Officer Panteleo in December 2014. After the police officer testified in his own defense that he did not put Mr. Garner into a chokehold, a maneuver that is prohibited by the NYPD, and that he feared that he will be pushed through a storefront window during the struggle. But a federal investigation into Mr. Garner's death proceeded, sharply dividing the Justice Department under 4 attorneys general and 2 presidents. The Attorney General at the time of the death, Eric Garner, said the evidence strongly suggests that the federal government should bring charges against Officer Panteleo, even though it is notoriously hard to prosecute police officers for the death in custody and the government might lose. I'm going to stop you right there. So they waited until 4 years later, they waited till, Donald Trump become president, that now the Attorney General decided that we decided not to press charges. So obviously what you're seeing, ladies and gentlemen, is that, which is not surprising, that they're not going to seek justice in any of those cases. This is one of them. And obviously, we're seeing time and time again with the Trayvon Martin case, with the Mike Brown case, and now with the Eric Garner case, they're really serious of not even push that issue and moving forward to seek justice when it comes to police officers that not going to be held accountable in this case. So I'm going to finish reading this. It said, while career civil rights prosecutors agreed with Mr. Holder, prosecutors under the United States Attorney in Brooklyn, Loretta E. Lynch, sharply disagreed. Officer Panteleo had testified that he intended to put Mr. Garner into a takedown hole that would not restrict his breathing, and that was not clear whether the dead man's civil rights had been violated. I'm gonna stop you right there. So the police officer, knowing that this chokehold technique has been banned by the NYPD decades ago, and yet they still claiming that the officer, in other words, they're saying that it's justifiable for what Officer Panteleo did to Eric Garner. Which, in my opinion, even if he does sell loose cigarettes, first of all, that don't have the right to even do this to him. Okay, there's a lot of places in New York City, for example, a lot of Arab shops that selling loose cigarettes. You're not cracking them down. There's other places in the New York City area that has selling loose cigarettes, but you're not cracking them down. But yet, when it comes to Eric Garner, that's a problem. So you see, this is why I said now that there's not going to be justice in those cases when unarmed black men and women have been murdered by police. And again, they talking about, well, this is a broken criminal justice system. Really, realistically, this criminal justice system would never been broken. It's been set up that way. So again, the man is free. There's nothing we can do about it. We cannot even fight, even if they wanted to, because the last hope was this federal civil rights case, and now that's gone. So Dan Panteleo is free. There's nothing they can do. And I mean, and the family can have a right to sue the NYPD, but now that's up in the air. So you might as well say that he's free to go. He's going to go to another precinct and going to do what he does best. Probably do something crazy and get away with it as well. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this. It said prosecutors in Brooklyn and in Washington also disagree about whether a passerby's cell phone video supported by Officer Panteleo's account. After Ms. Lynch succeeded Mr. Holder in April 2015, officials, including the head of the Civil Rights Division, Vanita Gupta, worked to convince her that the officers had used excessive force had likely violated Mr. Garner's civil rights. Ms. Lynch allowed the Civil Rights Division to take a lead role in the case, and the following September, the department replaced the FBI agents and prosecutors who had been working on this case with new team from outside of New York. But the case stalled again after Mr. Trump, like I said, won the president's election and appointed Jeff Sessions as his attorney general. Civil Rights Division prosecutors recommended that charges will be brought. And they asked the deputy attorney general at that time, Rod J. Rosenstein, about indicting Officer Panteleo. But Mr. Rosenstein did not allow the department to move forward on an indictment, and made officials said they believed that there was a good chance that the government would lose the case should it go to trial. The last time the federal government brought a deadly force case against a New York police officer was in 1998 when Officer Francis X. Levodi stood trial on was eventually convicted of civil rights charges in the choking death of a Bronx man named Anthony Baez. Federal prosecutors signaled they were still interested in a case as recently as June when Elizabeth Geddes, the head of the Civil Rights Unit that covered Staten Island, appeared at the disciplinary hearing for Officer Panteleo. She left the proceedings at police headquarters in Lower Manhattan after it became clear that Officer Panteleo would not testify. At the hearing, Officer Panteleo faced charges of recklessly using a chokehold on Mr. Garner and intentionally restricting his breathing. Prosecutors from the Civilian Complaint Review Board, a police oversight agency, argued that he should be fired. His attorney, Stuart London, maintained that the officer did not officer did nothing wrong, but used a technique taught in the police academy known as a seatbelt maneuver, not a chokehold. And that's the end of the article. Ladies and gentlemen, they're not going to do a damn thing to this guy. And it's proven time and time again that they're not going to do anything about this. It's like our lives doesn't matter. And it took 4 years later to now say that he's free. And, you know, the state of New York already said that they will not seek indictment against Officer Panteleo. And they waited until, I guess, Barack Obama left office, and when Trump took over, they already knew this case is going to stall until it's the right time to say, nah, we're not going to prosecute him. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is ridiculous. This is outrageous, but this is also not a surprise that this case took this long, and it's also not a surprise that they're not going to, the feds is not going to charge Dan Panteleo of the murder of Eric Garner. Leave a comment. Tell me what you think. Like, click, subscribe, and remember to click the notification bell for all the news and commentary. With that being said, this is Lions Den signing off. Deuces.